Hey everyone, it's Colin. I've been watching the masterpiece that is the DC animated universe, and the most recent show I just finished was Superman the Animated Series. I wanted to see more, and I figured out that there are 4 video games that are themed after the show. I'm so excited to feel like Superman did when he was saving Lois all those times through the show. So as it turns out, Superman doesn't have a good track record with video games. But I'm sure at least one of these has to be a good representation of Superman, right? Why don't we just start off with the first one to release, which was on the Game Boy. It's a rough Game Boy game. And at the time, I'm sure it was passable, but Superman can punch and he can fly. And neither one of those things feels good. It feels like you're playing Flappy Bird with Superman while he throws punches that never reach far enough for you to not get hit by your enemy. But I will say for the time that it came out, it was probably pretty passable for a Game Boy game, and I'm sure there are probably others just like it. That being said though, I did own this as a child, and I do remember thinking this game was a lot worse than all my other Game Boy games I had. So maybe it just wasn't ever that great, but I don't really have much else to say about that one other than it happened. But maybe they have it another couple generations down the line with Superman Countdown to Apokolips for the Game Boy Advance. This game was a little bit better than the last, and that's not saying much. For this game, the developers used an isometric view, which honestly does more harm than good. It just makes it hard to punch the enemies you see, but I mean, at least this time you can tell Superman is staying put in the air and not constantly fluctuating depending on how you hold the button. The controls again are pretty janky though, and this game is definitely not the best we've seen from the Game Boy Advance by any means. I think the only positive of this game is that you don't have to play it. It's just very generic and overall not a great Game Boy Advance game. But how about we get to the console games? The first one we're gonna visit is Superman 64. Now it's no secret that this game is really bad. You're in a virtual world created by Lex Luthor where he kidnaps your friends Lois and Jimmy Olsen. Next thing, you have to do a bunch of random quests throughout this first level that consists of a lot of rings. And I mean a lot of rings. And right with those rings, you have some of the worst flight controls I've ever felt in any game. But don't worry, aside from the rings, you get a lot of clunky quests that you kind of have to save civilians in, and half of them never want to work or give you enough instruction on what to do in them. Just when you thought it couldn't get worse, if you do manage to get past this first level, you get to the next one, which is an indoor section. And I mean it when I say the bar falls right to the ground. Superman feels terrible to move in these very tight and small environments. They're just way too congested. You fight Mala about halfway through this level after you punch a guard in his teeth, and your punches do consist of you flapping your arms around, flailing. You can't make this up. And after this, I proceeded to rage quit because this was more irritating than anywhere near fun. I mean, the game sucks. Of course, I wouldn't recommend this game as a good playthrough, but I would recommend it just so you could see how bad a game can be. The only enjoyment you'll get from this game is how much it breaks. And from what I've seen with the game, it's just more of the same the further you get in. The game did have some potential to be good though. It was rushed out to the public before it was ever ready to be released. You can see the ambition that Titus had with this title, and it's a shame they didn't get the time they needed to put into the game. If they did, maybe this would be a highlight for the N64 and the PS1. If they didn't rush the N64 release out before the PS1, and then ultimately canning the PS1 version because the game was so poorly received. Well, so far, the 3 out of 4 games have been a miss. Odds are not looking good. I won't lie, I'm starting to lose faith in our boy in the red and blue here. I guess I'll give our last game a chance, but I don't have really crazy high hopes for it. Superman Shadow of Apokolips is a Superman game no one talks about, and I have no clue why. This is definitely the best Superman game we have ever seen released, which is not a high bar by any means, I know. But I can say something about this one that I can none of the others. This is a good game. And yes, it by no means is perfect. And let's just get into a quick story overview before we get into all that stuff. So Superman is shown fighting Metallo at the very beginning of the game on a news report. We then cut to Lex Luthor, who's on the phone call with someone on Apokolips named Kanto. We then just become Superman and start playing as him through another just normal day of his life. But that day we do learn that Intergame is stirring up some trouble again, but this time instead of being people, they're actually robots. Pretty sure they use this as an excuse for Superman to show his full might and not hold back on the enemies. But honestly, you send people flying, so I'm okay with it. You spend about half the game looking into these robots, and you learn that Lex is actually working with Darkseid, whose constant quest is still taking over Earth. But of course, they both share the same goal in getting rid of Superman. Of course he doesn't succeed, and after we beat Kanto, we find out Lex has freed Metallo once again. During the breakout, we fight Livewire, we capture Parasite after he made it back to Metropolis, and now we're after Metallo, who's actually going after Lex Luthor, not knowing he was the person that let him out. After Superman swoops in and saves the day and beats Metallo, he learns that the weapon used was none other than LexCorp property. Superman brings the weapon back to Lex, and their plans are foiled once again. The game ends with Darkseid seeking revenge, perfectly setting up for a sequel that just never happened. This story is something that feels like it's straight out of the show, and I would say it made this game very enjoyable because of it. But when it comes to the gameplay, there's some things that aren't so great. The first one I'd like to bring up is the camera. For the most part, the camera does behave pretty decently. The devs decide to have the camera always be on Superman's back, in exchange use the right analog stick or the C stick, giving him extra control over his verticality and left and right motions. And I will say Superman having this extra movement is very good, it's great. But when you get in the tighter areas and sometimes where the objectives are, the camera can get a little stuck and you might not be able to see what you're doing. But by far the biggest problem I had with the game is gotta be the glitches that occurred. Now keep in mind I only played for 4 hours and that was enough to beat the entire story, but I encountered quite a few during that time. There's two I could think of specifically that brick the game. One being when you can get the override key, which is the huge orb. It fell down and fell into an area I can't even pick it up. So Superman, because he only wants to pick up on two sides of an object, couldn't even get it up. So I had to wait 5 minutes for the timer to run out so I get that game over and then get it to respawn. And the second one being the meltdown reactor with the coolant crates. I went to go pick up a crate and I went to go fly out of the door and I got stuck and I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything besides use my heat vision, which didn't help at all, or use my wind breath, which left me stuck, and I had to exit the level, reload it up again, and start from the very beginning. Also, the enemies throughout the game are all the same. There's little to no variety, which at some points, especially if you're playing on one sitting, makes the game very repetitive and feel very samey. And my last one, but probably my biggest one, is something so simple, but I'm gonna bring it up because I can't believe the devs didn't think of this. And that would be the lack of like a quick recovery in air and both on ground. You see, if you get hit by something that stuns you while you're in the air, you will have to wait till you fall all the way to the ground before you'll sit there for about 2 to 3 seconds and then you can finally get back up. The problem with this is it's way too long, because sometimes that fall could last 6 seconds and then you have another 3 on top of that. And with enemies such as tanks who can launch missiles, sometimes the missile that stuns you, they can launch another one that'll hit you right when you get unstunned, not letting you move at all, just pretty much locking you in the stun lock. And this happened to me quite a bit of times throughout this thing, especially in the Livewire fight, but also the Kanto one. I know I just put a lot of negatives out there, but there are a lot of good things about the game. And I would say the set variety is very, very good in this game. The locations and levels you go between are all very different from each other. None of them really feel the same, and they all have their own character to it. It's too bad they're all populated with the same enemies though. And the areas are always roomy enough for you to fly and get around easily, unlike that of Superman 64, which like I said was very congested. This game has no problem like that. And the boss fights are absolutely superb and definitely the highlight of the game. The best one definitely in my opinion being the Metallo boss fight, which was pretty challenging and had like 4 different stages. And I will say Livewire was definitely the second best. That one you had to be pretty creative with. The flight controls are super tight, which is a great change of pace compared to Superman 64's. This leads me to believe like the devs left a time capsule behind and all of a sudden like it just had the perfect code for them to make this perfect flight pattern, because there's only a 3-year gap between these games and it makes no sense how they got it from that to a perfect version of flight. And I would even say it's better than Superman Returns' flight, which is 3 years after this game, leaving them going backwards. The art style holds up phenomenally well. It pretty much is 100% accurate to that Superman the Animated Series, especially with that cel-shaded art style. Although Wind Waker definitely did it better on the GameCube, I won't lie. But this game does look better than Batman Vengeance, which came out I think a year or two before it, but was part of the same generation and also based off the animated series of that hero alike. Shadow of the Apokolips also has some cheat codes that I think are really cool. One being a super cool callback which fills the entire area with green mist, making fun of Superman 64. You can also play as Clark Kent and Parasite with these cheat codes, which I find very interesting and a very nice novelty for something they definitely didn't have to do. There's also an Explore Metropolis mode where you can just fly around. And as we've established, I love flying in this game. So that is such a cool addition. Also being able to see Metropolis in this Superman the Animated Series form and just being able to kind of explore it more, that was definitely a great novelty for a longtime fan like me. I don't really understand why they put it behind a cheat code though. You could have just made it a mode that's in there for everyone to easily access. Now, like I said, these are the only Superman games that were based on the animated series. And there's a few others out there that show off the Man of Steel, especially two in mind that I can think of. One being Superman Returns, and the second one being the Xbox exclusive, The Man of Steel, which came out only a month and a half after Superman Shadow of Apokolips. And I'm sure that one is just as good as this one. And if you do want to see me dive into these games as well, please feel free to let me know. But thank you for checking out my video, and on top of that, watching it all the way to the end, because that helps me so much. Feel free to share your thoughts or just comment down below. And you know, if you do want more, you can subscribe to the channel. Just saying, don't have to. And as you probably noticed my face cam in some of the gameplay footage, I do stream while I'm recording over on Twitch, which I'll leave that link in the description in case you want to go check that out as well, because I could definitely use people to talk to while playing stuff like this. Anyways, once again, I cannot thank you guys enough, and this has been The Pixel Critic. Oh my god, I'm shitting on him right now.